Hey everybody, it's Ed. Once again, welcome to Introduction to Sociology. Welcome back. And in this video, we're going to be talking about stratification. Some of the topics that we're going to discuss in stratification in this video include the systems of inequality, systems of stratification across the world, and poverty. So let's go ahead and get started by looking at this picture. If you look at the picture of stratification that I've presented you, I want you to understand that when I first started teaching sociology many years ago, I would always describe stratification as a ladder, as a ranking system or a ladder. The fact of the matter is, at least here in the United States, stratification is more it's more like a pyramid. In other words, if you're looking at a ladder, you're going to see that it's just a straight up and down. But the idea is here in the United States, we have a larger number of people at the lower end of the system of stratification than we do at the very top. We have a very small number of people at the top. We have a very large number of people at the bottom. So therefore, it is actually shaped like a pyramid. That's a better way of looking at it. When I talk about stratification, I want you to understand what stratification is. Stratification is a system of ranking people. And essentially, that's what we do here in the United States. We rank people. And in the United States, we rank people by class and socioeconomic status or money. Um, in fact, I have a nice little picture here dealing with the perceptions of the working class in here and how the wealthy 10% of this country looks down almost in shock and wonder that the working class, the bottom 90%, would actually want a equal distribution. So a good way to think of that would be of something along these lines. Imagine that you are in a classroom full of, I don't know, 25, 30 students, and your instructor says that he is going to bring pizza on the last day of class, because I've explained it to my students just this way. And instead of bringing enough pizza for everyone, he brings two large pizzas. Now, keeping in mind that the instructor, who was me, of course, likes to eat pizza, which I do, and I paid for it, which I did. I'm going to I'm going to take the whole large pizza for myself. And the rest of the students, the 25, 30 students, can divide up the large pizza that's remaining any way they wish. That is the premise of this picture. He's looking at them and saying, 10% of the people saying, I left you half of the income in this country. I left half of the income to the bottom 90%. You want more. Are you greedy? That would be like me looking at someone who's sitting there offended that he or she didn't get a piece of pizza in my classroom and going, well, I left you a whole large pizza. I left you half of the pizza that I bought. What are you, greedy? Now, I want to clarify before anybody starts hating on me. I just want to clarify that with me and the pizza and the students never happened. That's the example that I give to illustrate stratification. I should also mention that basically, yeah, if I order pizza, I'm going to do that, but I didn't. So don't hate on me, please. Now, the reason that this is important is because the wealthy in any society are going to have better access to life chances. And we'll talk about that more as we go along. In that vein, it's not so much that the problem is associated with being poor, but it's the distribution of income or the inequality of the distribution of income that is problematic for people. So let's talk about social stratification. There are four characteristics of stratification. You're going to need to know these for the exam. As I mentioned, social stratification is a social characteristic. Every society is stratified to some degree. You're going to have some people who are higher up on that pyramid and some people who are lower. It just depends on uh, how uneven the distribution is. But nevertheless, there are, even in very primitive societies, there is going to be some form of stratification. Stratification is also persistent across generations. As much as I would like to sit here and tell you that things can get better tomorrow, that's not likely to happen. These systems of stratification have been put in place and they've existed for hundreds of years, and they're probably not likely to change. Every society uses a different criteria, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And stratification is also maintained through these widely spread set of beliefs. Here in the United States, there's this thing called the Horatio Alger myth. I'm sure that a few of you may have heard of this. Basically, that is the belief that with hard work and, uh, you know, everything going right and doing everything you can and giving it all you got, this thing called the American dream is going to come true. You're going to become rich and prosperous. And in some instances, that is true. Some instances that happens. But there are still people out there that work hard every single day of their lives who don't have a lot of money, who are still struggling financially. So, this American dream, let me tell you something. The reason it's called the American dream is because you have to be asleep to believe it. Um, and we'll talk about that when we talk about symbolic interaction and why some people believe certain things that they do about people who are poor. Now, if we're talking about the different types of stratification that are out there, for example, slavery was a system of stratification. It was very rigid. The caste system was very rigid. The apartheid system was very rigid. And class and intersectionality, what we have here in the United States, is fluid to an extent. But let's go ahead and talk about slavery. And I'm not necessarily talking about the slavery that you may be thinking of. Slavery has existed for thousands of years throughout the world, and it is a very rigid system. Once you are born a slave, it is very highly unlikely that you are going to be able to overcome that you're going to be able to step out of that system. The caste system over in India, which, by the way, is a system also based on birth, was very, very strict, very rigid. There was no intermingling between the members of the different castes, the different sections of the caste system. There was the belief, at least in India, that if you were born into a very low section on the caste, it was because you'd done something wrong in your previous life. And so, therefore, it would be wrong of someone in a higher caste to try to give you a helping hand to help you up from the depths of your poverty. The apartheid system in South Africa, also a very rigid system. It was very similar to the Jim Crow laws that existed here in the United States after slavery. It divided individuals up into whites and non-whites, and non-whites were not allowed to, and non-whites and blacks were not allowed to eat in certain restaurants, ride in certain areas of the bus, sit in certain movie theaters, stay in certain hotels, or even live in certain parts of the town. The word apartheid means separate. Now, here's what I want to point out about slavery, caste, and apartheid. Slavery here in the United States, formally abolished. Caste in India, formally abolished. Apartheid in South Africa, formally abolished. They no longer exist. But in the United States, slavery, which was based on race, we still have problems with racism in this country. The caste system in India may have been abolished since the 1940s, but the mentality of of individuals looking down on others who are lower than they are, still exist. When the caste system was alive, you know, there were people that were actually not even on the pyramid. They were called the untouchables. These people were so low, they weren't even on the stratification. If their shadow touched someone in a higher class, the member of the higher class was considered contaminated, and they had to take a shower immediately. It no longer exists legally, but those attitudes are still there. And apartheid has been illegal in South Africa. It's been abolished since the early 1990s. But you better believe the people in South Africa still have a problem with racism. My point to all this is you can abolish the legal systems. You can abolish these systems of stratification, but you're not going to change people's minds and attitudes quite so easily. Here in the United States, we have, believe it or not, we have been based more on class and intersectionality. We'll talk about intersectionality when we talk about sex and gender in this class. But I want you to know that we have a fluid system of stratification. When these systems, slavery, caste, and apartheid were in existence, it was very difficult, if not impossible, for you to slavery. You back, you know, thousands of years ago, and even you might have been able to buy your freedom, but in the caste system and the apartheid system, not happening, not happening. Here in the United States, however, we have this intersectionality. We are based on class. We're able to move up because we have a fluid system of stratification. The fact of the matter is, the odds of moving up in our fluid system of stratification, highly unlikely. I know some people like to bring up the case of Oprah Winfrey, because Oprah Winfrey was somebody who grew up in a type of poverty that very many of us could only imagine. And Oprah Winfrey became one of the richest people in the entire world. But the fact of the matter is this: Oprah Winfrey is the exception and not the rule. It's very difficult. In fact, according to the Chetty study, and you guys may be interested in this because of where we all live, of the 50 largest cities in the United States, the city that has the worst potential for someone to who is born in poverty to rise up and overcome poverty, Charlotte, North Carolina. Not New York, not Los Angeles, not Houston, not Chicago, not Seattle, not Miami, wherever. The lowest chance that you have, the people that have the lowest chance to overcome poverty, if they were born in poverty, is right here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that is a fact. So, since we're talking about class, I wanted to mention this, and this is really an oversimplification, at least for Marx. Marx said that society is made up of two classes. Actually, he recognized that there were more than that, although he also talked about false class consciousness. But just for simplicity's sake, go with this. He said that society was made up of two classes: the proletariat workers and the bourgeoisie, the wealthy owners. And there was always that conflict between them. Weber, on the other hand, said that class was a set of people that had a similar set of circumstances, and it was made up of things such as wealth, power, and prestige. Now, the fact of the matter is, I'm probably not going to quiz you on that. You're probably not going to see that on the exam. However, it is good to know for what we are going to get into in the next few slides. So stay tuned. Theories of stratification, perspectives, what have you. Conflict, structural functionalism, looking at the macro level. Symbolic interaction, looking at the micro level. If we look at the conflict level, if we look at the the macro level of conflict theory, we are saying that income and wealth control everything in a society. The fact of the matter is this: the elite in this country control the media and the technology, and that is a fact. In fact, More than 90% of the news outlets, the media outlets in this country, are controlled by a literal handful, 5 or fewer corporations. And that is a fact, my friends. So when you hear something in the media, you have to ask yourself, is it real? Is it real what I'm hearing? Or what, more appropriately, what I want to know is, what are they not telling me? Because there are people out there that control what is communicated to the masses through the media. Now, I'm not one of those people that's a conspiracy theorist, but I'm telling you, you always have to scratch deeper on the surface. You always have to look. You always have to look deeper than what you see and what you hear through the media, because the media will lie to you. And I'm not saying that one media outlet is worse than the other. I'm telling you right now, they have a vested interest. Fox News caters to certain people, to certain viewers. CNN caters to certain people, to certain viewers. For many in the media, it is all about advertising revenue. And they're going to deceive you, they're going to lie to you, and they're going to do it for one of two reasons. The first reason is because they have an objective of doing it. And the second reason is, and this is possible, is that they just make a mistake. People are human. The same reason that people will lie to you face to face is the same reason that the media is deceptive. They're either doing it on purpose or they don't know any better. And either way, it is your job to be critical of what you hear. So understand that. Understand also the terms income and wealth. Income is very simple. Income is money coming in from any source. It can be a paycheck, it can be dividends, but it's coming in on a regular interval. Okay? It's coming in. Income. I have a great income. I have a wonderful income. The problem is my outgo exceeds my income. So there you go. There is also the concept of wealth. Wealth is a very complicated formula, but I'll break it down for you as simple as I can. You take what someone owns and you subtract what they owe, what someone is worth, and subtract their debts, and you get their wealth. Sad to say, I'm actually probably worth more dead than alive, but be that as it may, I press on. Now, where the conflict perspective came in and said that there's a lot of bad things going on with stratification, and we see a lot of issues with stratification, and there's a lot of mistreatment because the elite are controlling everything. Davis and Moore, the structural functionalist, said that stratification was actually a good thing. In fact, if I haven't mentioned this before, I'll say it right now. When you think of the conflict perspective, the glass is half empty. When you think of the structural functionalist perspective, the glass is half full. Davis and Moore said that societies are stratified based on occupations, and that is a good thing, because it's needed. There are some people that need to be paid more money because they need to take the risks. They need to pay the price to get the training they need and the education they need, because society needs those positions filled. Now, what does that mean? Well, think of it this way. If you're going into the medical field and you're going to be a doctor, would you be a doctor? Would you go through all of that? Would you go through the medical school, not just the college, but the medical school? And quite frankly, in many instances, I know they start long before they get into college. All that stress, pay all that money, because you're coming out with some serious student loans. Would you pay all that money and go through all that work and give up your life for $7.25 an hour? Maybe you would. I don't know. I wouldn't. I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't. But we need doctors, and therefore we need to pay doctors more money. We need to pay nurses more money. We need to pay uh, people that are necessary for our society to function more money. I almost said we need to pay lawyers more money, but you know, there's a million lawyer jokes out there. I ain't going to make one now, but I want you to understand what I'm saying. With all of that education that's needed, all of the certificates that are needed, and all of the time and the money that these people have to spend to get them, Davis and Moore are saying that these people deserve to be compensated better. And if you don't want to do that, go do something else. Go do something that doesn't require all that time, money, and education. Remember, conflict, glass half empty. Functionalist, glass half full. I live with 4 cats. That glass is on the floor for me. Symbolic interaction is the individual micro level. And this is Goffman. We were talking about the dramaturgy by Goffman. He also talked about symbolic interactionism in terms of stratification. And basically what he said was this: we look at people, and based on how they're dressed, based on how they speak, based on the car they drive, the neighborhood they live in, the foods they eat, how they eat, we look at everything about them and we make an assumption about them. We make a judgment about them, whether they're rich or they're poor. And I'm going to tell you something right now. One time I was teaching a class, I had a student told me, said, Ed, you know, I really get sick and tired because I work in a grocery store, and I get sick and tired of people coming in my store, like it's her store, right? Coming in my store using EBT, food stamps, carrying a Gucci bag, got the latest smartphone, nicest clothes, getting in a Mercedes Benz. She said, that really upsets me. I said, let me tell you something. I said, first of all, you don't know that person's situation. You're looking at that person and you're making a judgment, and you could be right, but you could also be very wrong. You don't know. That person might have paid that Mercedes off right before she lost her job. Those clothes she could have gotten at Goodwill. That purse she could have gotten at Goodwill. That phone could be a gift from her family to make sure that she does not get lost. Do not judge people because they look poor or don't look poor, because you may be right, but you also may be wrong, and you don't have the right to do that. And another story, my mom used to work in a bread store in Eastern North Carolina, and had this customer come in. This was in the 1980s, and I know that's long before many of you were even born. But this man used to come in. He was probably about 100 years old back then, and he came in and he had a beat up old pickup truck that looked like it was about to fall apart. And he came in and he had the baseball cap and the overalls and the t-shirt. He had the 5 o'clock shadow. Actually, it's more like a 10 o'clock shadow because he didn't shave. He had that tobacco stains coming down his mouth. He looked bad. He really did. He looked like he didn't have a penny to his name. One day, after a couple of weeks, he didn't show up. One day, the sheriff's department came in. I happened to be there with my mom. The sheriff looked at my mom, says, do you know, and I can't remember his name, so let's just call him John Smith. Do you know John Smith? My mom says, no, never heard of him. Sheriff pulls out a picture. She goes, oh, that's John. Oh yeah, I know him. He used to come in all the time. Haven't seen him in a couple of weeks. Hope he's okay. Sheriff's department says, no, not really. He died 2 weeks ago. It's like, wow. Sheriff said, we're trying to find his next of kin because that man had $100,000 stuffed under his mattress. I looked at my mom. I said, don't you remember Uncle John? My mom goes, knock it off. But my point being, ladies and gentlemen, you don't know. You can't look at somebody and you can't tell whether they're rich or they're poor. We try. So also, you got to understand when we talk about symbolic interaction, you need to understand that the stereotypes about people who are poor. The fact of the matter is this: not everybody that is poor is lazy. Not everybody that is poor is unwilling to work. Not everybody that is poor is is just wanting to be on welfare, is trying to game the system. I had people tell me, they said that they should drug test people for welfare. Well, that's the craziest idea I've ever heard, because they've done that out in Arizona, by the way. They found one person on welfare after doing a couple of thousand tests. The fact of the matter is, most people who are on uh, government assistance need it. They're not there trying to game the system. They're not. It's just not true. But those stereotypes, symbolic interaction right there. So you need to think about that. And when you watch the video that I'm going to show you in this class, you need to think about that. Don't be so judgmental. And I guess we need to go ahead and define poverty. There are two types of poverty that we need to define: relative poverty and absolute poverty. Relative poverty refers to the majority of poverty here in the United States. Most people who are poor or living below the poverty line in the United States are poor only because they are not as well to do as others. They don't have name brand clothing. They don't have brand new vehicles. They don't live in a brand new house, what have you. But they're able to get by. Um, they're able to make ends meet month to month in most instances. I will mention that the poverty line for a family of four in the United States, and this is a family of four, is about $27,000 a year, give or take. That's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money for one person, much less two adults and two kids. But the federal poverty line was established in the 1960s, and it really hasn't changed much. It hasn't kept up with the cost of inflation. But I will mention that of those people, you're going to see about 1 in 4 children under the age of 18 that are living below the poverty line. You're also going to see 1 in 10 adults over the age of 65 living below the poverty line. But most of the people in this country, it is relative poverty. Now, there are certain parts of the country where absolute poverty takes place. Absolute poverty is also found in other countries around the world. Um, Absolute poverty is where people have trouble meeting their basic needs. They're not able to get enough to eat. They're not able to buy clothes. They're not able to buy the things they need in order to survive. And we see that in other countries around the world and in certain parts of the United States. I would point out, and I mentioned this to several people in the past in my classes, the poorest nation on earth, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The last I checked, the per capita income of the Democratic Republic Congo was about $380, $400, give or take, per year. That means that the people on average in the Democratic Republic of the Congo are earning a little bit over $1 per day. Now, my friends, if that isn't absolute poverty, I don't know what is. So be aware of the difference between relative and absolute poverty. You will see it on your exam. Last but not least is the culture of poverty. Here in the United States, especially, the culture of poverty is something that many sociologists have examined, and we see that uh, there are people that are living in poverty that have lived in generations of poverty. Previous generations have been living in poverty, and eventually the cycle becomes so great that some individuals may decide that it is just their destiny to be poor, and they may give up they may give up trying to change their fate, right? And that happens. There are some people that decide they would rather not work and let the government take care of them. Now, I want you to understand this is not true of everyone who's living in poverty. I grew up in poverty, and I made something of myself. And I know that a lot of people out there, they want to make something of themselves. They want to overcome poverty. So when you think about this, I want you to keep in mind and think of this with a grain of salt, because not everybody that is in poverty wants to stay that way. There are a lot of people who are living in poverty that want to better themselves. So this guy's name was Oscar Lewis. He came up with this idea. I should point out that we often do not give people who are living in poverty the opportunity to escape. We just don't, we don't do it. It's not that they want to stay there. It's that they have given up hope in many instances because we have not given them the opportunity. I believe that if you give somebody a fish, you feed them for a day, but if you teach them to fish, you feed them for life. We're not giving people in poverty the opportunity to rise above it. We should. We really should. Guys, that's all I have. If there are any questions or comments or concerns, please reach out to me and I will see you online.